seminar of EDUCEN. If you are a long-time adherent of our webinar series, you will have noticed it's the fourth webinar. The last three were a bit earlier this year, but this one is specifically intended to tell you about the handbook and the city guidelines that the city reports that we made during the EDUCEN project. The EDUCEN project is a European Commission funded action, coordination and support action to help the cities that we worked with, 7 European cities, mostly in the south of Europe, to learn about each other and to learn from others, from experts, from game makers, from researchers, and we would, on the other hand, learn from them about cities, cultures, and catastrophes. What is specific about cities? What is specific about cultural diversity when you are preparing for a disaster or responding to a disaster? And indeed, we learned an awful lot, and we put a lot of that into the handbook and into the city manuals. And we will first hear from 2 cities, the city of Dordrecht in the Netherlands and the city in Greece called Volos, about what they learned about culture and catastrophe and how the handbook may be useful for them, and how, of course, how they contributed to the handbook. Then we will hear from Piotr Magnuszewski in Poland about the role of serious games, how they can be useful to learn and empathize with each other, and learning about diversity and cultural issues in disaster risk reduction. And after questions and answers, I might also introduce the handbook itself by giving you a very short tour of the website that's up and that's now almost fully running, and tell you what's where, and hopefully illustrate a few of the things that came up during the presentations about cultural memory, about cities in the where they are in the website. The name of the website is educen.cultureanddisaster.eu, and in case that went too fast for you, at the end of our workshop you will be automatically guided to that website. So just stick it out, and in the end you'll end up with our website. In case you have a question or a comment, you can live join us. For that, you will need to indicate that you would like to say something, and you can do that via the dialog box in the left bottom hand corner of the screen in front of you. So you can say, I would like to ask a question, and at the first opportunity, we will give you the floor. That was by way of introduction, EDUCEN, the EDUCEN project, and what we are going to do this afternoon. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. If it's indeed we have the right connection, we have Georg Frerks, who will say a few things about EDUCEN itself. Is that the case?
Yes, I am here.
Hello, Georg.
Georg Frerks.
Welcome. This is Professor Georg Frerks from the NL Defense Academy. Welcome to our webinar, and can I ask you to say a few things more about EDUCEN and your role in that EDUCEN?
Yes, thank you very much, Jeroen. As you already indicated, EDUCEN is a European-funded large project with 10 participant institutions around Europe, from Sweden to Italy, Istanbul, the Netherlands, Spain and Greece, if I am complete, Poland as well. And our role as the Netherlands Defense Academy has been very much thinking also about the cultural memory part, and also around organizational subcultures, where different groups of first responders or second responders have to collaborate in disaster. And one of our main topics of interest was, for example, also how military and civilian organizations collaborate. Myself being, from my background, a sociologist, I also have been very much interested in the gender dynamics also an important cultural aspect of working in disaster and working with diverse groups. So if I may end with a personal impression, I'm not going to repeat the whole program. I must say, working in EDUCEN with so many different partners on a very under-researched topic, namely the role of culture in disaster and disaster response, has been a very enriching experience. And I am also very glad to see the handbook as a concrete result of many detailed studies, discussions, and seminars we had. And of course, that handbook will be a central topic for today. And I'm quite sure, that all the listeners, all the participants in this webinar will find something of interest in that handbook, which, as you said, Jeroen, is or will be very soon completely available online. So with that, I would like to conclude my short introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Georg. As Georg said, it's not only going to be online, but actually it is already online in its beta version. So there are still some nuts and bolts that may need to be improved, but the overall impression we can already give you today, as the website is live. And in a couple of weeks, we also should have our printed version, slightly shorter than the handbook version, ready, so that you can use good old print to read about the various topics in the disaster and culture domain. There are, of course, some classics on disaster and culture, even from the 60s and 70s in American literature, and more recently, the book by Kruger and others who have written very memorable stuff on disaster and on cities and on cultures, but not about Europe. So what we try to fill is this gap on what actually is important for European cities, city managers and disaster managers to know, and to bring to bear both the knowledge from books and literature as well as practical experience. We were aiming to have 3 cities today, including the city of Lorca in Spain, Murcia. Unfortunately, for personal reasons, the speaker from Lorca could not make it. She sends her apologies. But fortunately, we have 2 remaining cities who are waiting and raring to tell you about their experiences. First, you will hear Rik Heinen from the city of Dordrecht, the municipality in the Netherlands, who will first present some slides and experiences about Dordrecht. Then you will see a little video, and then he'll come back and close his presentation on the relation between city and culture and disaster in Dordrecht, a flood-prone city in the West Netherlands. Rik, take it away.
Hello all. Yes, I will give a short presentation about, let me just go to it. All right, Dordrecht was a case study in EDUCEN, which means we did not partake in the full program. We were at some of the meetings, and we did use the results, and we are using the results that are coming out of it right now. And we also did some small research in Dordrecht. I'll give first a short overview of the city, of the challenges we are facing, of what we are doing about it, and how we are hoping to use the results of EDUCEN in the near future. First, a little bit about the city. We call Dordrecht an island. As you can see, it is the central location in the map, and it's completely surrounded by water. The location is just south of Rotterdam, so we are quite close to the North Sea, and with the rivers on the other side, it creates quite a dynamic situation where we're not only influenced by the water coming from the rivers, but also from the tide coming in from the sea. We have roughly 120,000 inhabitants, and the island where we live on is a combination of industry, urban areas, and nature areas, which create quite a dynamic system of spaces where people live and work. Our ambition, our overall ambition is for Dordrecht to become a self-reliant island. which means that even that the city we have can withstand any climate challenges that comes our way, but also in case of a disaster or in case of a flood, most of the city would still be able to support, at least for a short time, itself. We use the multi-layer safety approach for this, which means that we do not only look at dikes. A lot of course, in the Netherlands, we do have a lot of dike systems. We need it because we have a very low lying country, and we have a very good dike system out in Dordrecht. However, we look further than that, and we also want to have a good layer 2 and 3, where dikes is the physical layer 1, the prevention part of disaster management. Layer 2 is spatial adaptation, which is decreasing possible impact or decreasing the possible impact of a flood. And layer 3 is evacuation, which means mitigating some of the impact of a flood. Spatial adaptation, I've given some short examples. For example, you can waterproof new urban development and restructuring programs. We can provide extra protection to certain vulnerable locations or systems that we do not want to fail during a flood, for example, hospitals or electricity situations. And we can form our city in such a way, we can have such a spatial layout of the city that it helps the evacuation part in case of a disaster. So with higher areas or places where people can go temporarily to then later leave the area. Thinking about high areas like regional dikes or shelter locations where people will be safe for at least a couple of days. And especially in this part, we have looked at what EDUCEN can contribute to this, as this is something that in the Netherlands we are still learning a lot with. There is not a lot of experience concerning heavy policy creation in this field, and we hope to learn from the other cities and from the handbook that EDUCEN is publishing on how to better use possible culture, use possible systems in adapting our city and our plans. As I said, Dordrecht already has some culture. We are a very old city. In 2020, we'll celebrate 800 years of city rights. And in those 800 years, Dordrecht has been in constant influence by water. In 1421, we had a giant flood, the St. Elizabeth flood, which, while the old city center remained livable, the entire hinterland of Dordrecht, which is now partly diked again, was flooded, and for hundreds of years it remained largely flooded. Even in more recent times, we had quite a lot of smaller floods. Our urban area, our old urban area is still outside the dike, so this is still open to the water. And we also have a large part which is completely diked off. But in the old city center in 1954, we still had a large flood. And when you look back in the 19th century, as the first picture on top right shows, I don't know if it's clear to see, all those markings on that gray vertical stone are different levels of flood. Luckily, since some of the delta works, we have had less of an impact on the old city center, but it is still open to the water. What we partly want to do, and what we also have used EDUCEN for, is using this history of water management and using the memories of people who have still survived and who still remember the flood of 1954 in our own preparation, in creating our own awareness, so that people have a better idea of what can happen, what has happened in the past, and what they can still do this day to increase their own safety. The cultural memory is less tangible in Dordrecht. There are some monuments, there are some stones still visible that indicate the height of the flood, but it is also less current. A lot of the people do not really think it's a possibility anymore. People look at the dikes and often say this is the main system that we have and it protects us completely. And only in recent years we have now seen that there is a difference in mentality and people are again looking at a more integrated approach to water risk and water safety. And are now looking again, okay, we have very good dikes, but what can we do more? And as a municipality, we also want to use this approach. We see that in our old city center, which is outside the dike ring, we have quite a high resilience. People are quite aware of what will happen, what could happen, and they have taken a lot of precautions in their own homes. But when you look at inside the dike ring, this is less the case. So we would like to use the cultural memory, which is already placed in the outside of the dike ring, in the old city center, and use this in the entire city, so that the entire city is prepared for a possible flood. Raising awareness. We already do some aspects from the municipality. Everybody who's outside the dike gets a yearly letter explaining the situation, explaining what could happen, explaining what they can do. In case of high water, we supply sandbags as the municipality that people can pick up from central locations and use to protect their own homes. We have a walking tour that a lot of visitors come for each year. Even with EDUCEN on the final conference, we did this walking tour. And it clearly shows spatial adaptation and adaptations that have happened in the old city center, and a lot of different possible measurements people can take for themselves. And we also recently had a water safety expo where we had a general exposition about what could happen in case of a big flood in Dordrecht, where our people who live in the city could just come and learn about the situation and learn also what they could do to protect themselves. What we still want to do in the near future is we have just gotten a serious game with the help of our Polish partners from EDUCEN. We want to use this to create more awareness. We want to go to a school with this serious game, play it with the youngster people in the city, but also with all the generations to clearly indicate what the people can expect and also what people can do for themselves, and also to show the results of choices that people will make. We also want to use culture and the history of Dordrecht more. We hope that by using this and by using the information and the tips that we get from the Handbook of EDUCEN, by using that we hope to create more awareness in the city and also creating a more long-lasting awareness. And finally, vertical evacuation campaign. This is the end result of the creating awareness that we want to do. As Dordrecht is an island, it will be very difficult in case of flood to get everybody off the island. A lot of people will have to remain on the island because there will not be enough time to evacuate everybody. So for the people who will have to remain, we want to use vertical evacuation, which will mean they will go up in their own houses, or they will look for a high location in the direct neighborhood where they can stay and remain safe until they can be evacuated outside of the area. To do this, however, of course, people need to be prepared. They need to know what they should have put in their own houses to be able to remain in their own houses. And especially with this part, we really need to create a sense of urgency and a sense of awareness where people understand the risk, but also understand what they can do for themselves. Just some of the examples that we already done. To show you the city walking tour is in our old city center. You can also clearly see from the channels that it is a very water heavy area, and basically also the red lines indicate the area which is roughly outside of the dikes. And on the left we see our own EDUCEN group enjoying this city walking tour during our end conference here at the end of March. Another example was our exposition that we talked about. It did show the possible flood scenario in base of a storyline. You can see on the top, on the bottom left, it is really in Dutch, but you can see that we had different phases, 2 weeks before the disaster, 1 week before the disaster, an hour before the disaster, an hour afterwards, and so onwards, where we very clearly indicated what would happen, what the choices would be made, and what people could do to kind of show people what a possible flood situation would look like, and also what they would be faced with if they would be living in one of the lower areas of Dordrecht. This was for two reasons: to inform the people on what will happen, but also to again give people on the same time information about what you can do to help themselves. I will just shortly show some of the reactions that we got, but we'll also look at a short video after the questions. And the reactions varied from a very nice exhibition to "I hope it never happens," to even more questions from people living in the city who now gotten this but do not think it is complete yet. So this really shows that also the people who live in the Dordrecht would like to hear more about this and would like to know more about what they can do. This was my very short presentation. If you have any questions now, I would be happy to answer them. We're also going to show a short movie after this where some of our people who live in the city talk about the exposition they visited. I should also tell you we have another video also clearly explaining what Dordrecht has gotten out of EDUCEN and what we hope to do with the results. This video will be uploaded on our YouTube page of the municipality of Dordrecht at the end of today with subtitles. Currently it's also already available in Dutch. Okay, thank you all. Are there any questions? Don't know if Jeroen will lead.
Thank you very much, Rik. There don't seem to be questions from the floor right now. So I propose that we now show the very short video that you made available on the public engagement that Dordrecht did.
Yeah. Okay.
Ja, een heel goed initiatief. Bewoners in de regio van het eiland van Dordrecht moeten zich bewust zijn van het overstromingsrisico dat ze lopen. En dit is gewoon een goede voorbereiding op een situatie die kan gebeuren. We hoeven er niet bang voor te zijn, maar het kan natuurlijk wel gebeuren. Dus heel veel.
En mijn kinderen hadden wel graag een spelletje erbij gewild. Maar ik merkte wel dat juist omdat ik iemand meeliep, dat ze wel heel veel gehoord hebben en geluisterd. Ik heb zelf wel het idee van, ja, gaat het nu echt gebeuren? Hoe belangrijk is het nu? En ik vind ook niet, het is ook oké dat je nu weet wat je kan doen als het zou gebeuren. Dus prima, leuk initiatief.
Ik vond het zeer interessant. Ik wist niet dat ik na de postcode-test 4 meter onder water zou kunnen komen te staan. Maar gelukkig heb ik een zonderetage die hoger is. En wat me nog meer opviel is dan deze filmpje van wat er eventueel zou kunnen overstromen. Zodat je een idee hebt van hoeveel en ver het water zou kunnen komen. Heel interessant. En dan de borden met de uitleg van wat er staat te gebeuren als er water zou komen of een doorbraak zou dreigen. Heel interessant. En dan het radioverslag van Radio Rijnmond van wat je dus allemaal eventueel zou moeten doen, of kunnen doen, als je naar zolder moet verhuizen. Dat je dus water moet verzamelen en eventueel eten, omdat je toch wel 2-3 dagen moet rekenen voordat dus dan het spul weer voorbij is. Heel interessant.
Nou, we zijn net rondgelopen, mijn vrouw, ik en 2 van onze kinderen. En ik vond echt een heel goede, duidelijke waarschuwende werking gaat hier vanuit. Wat moet je dus doen als er zoiets kan gebeuren? En eigenlijk geeft het ook wel een geruststellend gevoel dat je eigenlijk nu weet van, dat daar moet ik op letten. Ik vond ook, en mijn kinderen denk ik ook, deze slaapkamer boven heel duidelijk. Het geeft gewoon een heel duidelijk beeld. En dat het eigenlijk slimmer is om gewoon thuis te blijven dan weg te gaan, dat je anders misschien meer in het probleem komt. Dus dankjewel. Wil jij nog iets zeggen?
Ja. Wat een leuke tentoonstelling, dankjewel.
So some responses to the public engagement that Dordrecht tried to do. Dordrecht tells us that they find it very hard to reach anybody under 50, basically. If you have normal information meetings or consultation meetings, the people who show up tend to be more senior citizens or people who have a lot of time on their hands, and not the young families or the new generation that you also would like to reach, through which maybe serious games may be a way of engaging them. And you may wonder, if you're not Dutch, why this is such an issue. Well, in the Netherlands, we've not had a major flooding since the 1950s. We had some more modest river floodings in the 90s, but basically it's not on people's radar. And also, even at local authority level, there is sometimes no willingness to tell people about flood risk. They would rather not talk about it or pretend that we're 100% safe behind the dikes, but there's always a residual risk. Rik, would you like to say something about the video?
Yes. I think the remark you made is very correct. We do have sometimes a problem reaching certain people who will not show up at the common municipality meetings. The Exposition was one of the events where we reached a little bit of a wider audience. But this is something that we want to continue. For example, as you said, with the serious game, because especially we have found that the people who we find difficult to reach are also often the people who do not know yet what the problem is, what the risk is. So we want to use these kinds of systems more. And with EDUCEN and with hopefully the handbook, I've scrolled through it. We're looking forward to the physical edition also. We hope to get a better idea of what else we could use next to expositions, next to the serious game, which we're going to go to the schools with. Maybe some other systems, tips, anything to create awareness and to get the message that we want to bring across. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Rik. Rik Heinen from Dordrecht.
Yeah.
In all the hectic webinar work, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Jeroen Warner from Wageningen University and also the EDUCEN coordinator in the past 2 years. We are now broadcasting live from what we call the EDUCEN room in Wageningen University Social Science Department, which is the situation room for this project. Rik already mentioned serious games. You will hear later during this webinar from Piotr Magnuszewski about how to use games, why games are useful and in fostering cultural empathy, which is something that may not only be useful when dealing with cultures that are, let's say, different, may say migrants, or dealing with handicapped people, or dealing with basically people who are different from you, but also between organizations. Even within the same organization, there can be subcultures that have a quite different way of dealing with risk, dealing with social networks, dealing with surprises. But before we do that, we first go to Volos, to the other end of Europe. Volos is fourth city in Greece and had historically to cope with earthquake disasters. And our partner in this project, our Greek partner Handbook, is here represented by Miranda Dandoulaki. She's been supporting us and will tell you about how she tried to deal with the EDUCEN ideas and to translate them into a city context and municipal disaster risk reduction. Welcome, Miranda. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this exciting final webinar of EDUCEN. I would briefly try to introduce Volos and Volos' role in EDUCEN and say a few things about the way forward. As you said, it's really difficult to speak about disaster management in Greece if you don't refer to earthquakes. Something like 2% of the global seismic energy and 50% of the seismic energy of Europe is released in Greece. Here's a map with the epicenters of earthquakes, and Volos is here. Is a coastal city and a port. The municipality counts for around 150 inhabitants, and the city is the only outlet to the Sea of Thessaly, which is a large agricultural region. Volos has been an industrial center and has been suffered many critical events. I will refer to the main ones. The inflow of a huge number of Greek refugees from Turkey during the 1920s. 13,000 people came to Volos, which Volos was an industrial center at the time. That was around 30% of the then population. Of course, World War II and the Civil War that followed, and earthquake and flood disasters in the years 1954 till 57 in magnitude 7 occurred 50 kilometers from Volos, causing extended damage. And some months later, another earthquake of magnitude 6.2 hit Volos. Out of the 10,000 buildings of Volos, only 1,200 remain without damage. To make the situation worse, in the period of the aftershocks, floods killed 36 people in Volos. Since the 50s, there is no major disaster, earthquake disaster in Volos. Then we had the deindustrialization in the mid-80s, and now the city, of course, like the whole Greece, is harshly hit by the economic crisis. Now, all these events, all these critical events, are expressed in a tangible way through the structure of the city, because here we can see the area where the refugees were housed in an extension of the city outside the main torrent of the city, and this torrent causes also floods in this area. Now, as you probably know, EDUCEN focuses on culture. So EDUCEN examines main aspects of culture, that is cultural networks, cultural memory, infrastructure, empathy, and learning. Not all case study cities, of course, could deal with all of those aspects. So Volos was assigned with a task to focus on cultural memory. This does not mean that cultural memory does not link with other aspects. Just before, I just demonstrate that cultural memory is expressed in a tangible way through the structure of the city and the infrastructure. But the thing is that cultural memory, what is it? At the beginning, it was really puzzling because cultural memory seemed so vague, so elusive. What to do with it? It was the Netherlands Defense Academy and the academic partners who tried to make us grasp the concept in the state of the art. So cultural memory reveals how communities adapt their cultural reservoirs over time in light of disastrous events based on accumulated shared experience and local knowledge of a group of people. And cultural memory also includes understanding how catastrophic events are absorbed into history and exert an indirect influence on culture. Now, this was offered to us, and it was a great help to advance our case study. It is extremely important that now online there is a wiki explaining all the basic concepts. Then, of course, the next step is trying to identify how cultural memory is expressed. And suddenly, so many things were made obvious. Once you start looking, then you find, not the other way around, I'm afraid. So this is a painting demonstrating the main earthquake of 1958 in Sofades. And also there are songs. We discovered that there is a blog in the city focusing on history, and there is a tag earthquakes there. And also in the city, there is a documentation center and a museum. And the current exhibition in the museum is organized around the critical events which formed, in a sense, Volos. But our task was somehow to find how the one side of this light, that is cultural memory, relates with the other one, which is disaster management. And this proved to be very tricky. We had to identify, of course, the key issues for Volos and for Greece. And here I will try to summarize which are those. First is how past recovery and reconstruction in its various aspects informs handling present disasters. Then we have to say that we just said about the inflow of refugees, increasing 30% the population in Volos, but at the same time, we had the current refugee crisis in Greece. So we wanted to explore how the refugee identity of then, the 20s, connects, if it connects, with current crisis management and how. And also we identified that in Greece, disaster management has a strong engineering drive, and social sciences are not really part of the game. So somehow we need to bring together players from different disciplines in role and initiate a dialogue on culture and cultural memory and how these link with disaster. And finally, I just mentioned the museum and the documentation center, and they are doing a great job in foster cultural memory, but they are not aware at all that they could target also disaster risk reduction. So somehow we try to bridge this gap between museums on the one hand and disaster risk reduction on the other hand. How we did, how we attempted to do this. Okay, with different events and activities. We organized a workshop on cultural memory and disaster risk reduction, and we invited experts to present the reconstruction or recovery of different cities of Greece from disasters. It was the Great Fire of Thessaloniki of 1917, the Kefalonia earthquakes of 1953, Volos recovery after the earthquakes and the floods in the 50s, and the reconstruction of Kalamata after the earthquakes of 1986. I won't try to explain this, but each case study just brought up a conclusion, an aspect, a lesson. And if I want to really summarize everything in phrases, it was obvious that the influence of the context, historic, social, political, economic, and cultural, influence a lot choices and decision made for reconstruction. So basically, reconstruction is not an engineering problem, it's a problem of a society and of economy. I know it seems very obvious, but it's not obvious to everybody. Also that the main dilemma in reconstruction is between the rush to rebuild and back to pre-disaster normal, or a visionary reconstruction and improvement of things. And to do this visionary reconstruction, we need to maintain a long-term view, even in the emergency phase, when everything seems urgent. And also another conclusion is that inclusive and participatory decision-making during reconstruction is a must, because then somehow a more fair and balanced reconstruction is generated. Then trying to touch upon the refugee issue, we organized a focus group with representatives of the Refugee Association. You see here the pictures. First one is from the Museum of Volos. The refugees in the 20s, they had their own football team called Victory. And in the camps nowadays, the refugees have already formed their own football teams playing football. Somehow the situation is not the same, of course, but there are a lot of similarities worth examining. Also, a refugee camps was set up to Volos, close to Volos, to shelter refugees and immigrants. In the focus group, a lot of interesting things were made clear and obvious and were brought up. It's difficult to summarize, but for me, for instance, it's important that the statement, every citizen, either refugee or local, has been influenced by earthquakes and floods, and that helped them to smoothen their differences. These incidents brought them together, as well as the German-Italian occupation and the industrialization of the 80s. That's something the representative of a refugee association said. Or refugee children today are not allowed to give up because of the crisis. Their ancestors made it through more difficult situations. They made families, raised and educated children who became scientists nationwide. So resilience is there. Then we had a roundtable with civil protection experts. A lot of experiences and interesting things were brought up, bringing up the role of culture. But I would like to stick to this. For civil protection, truth and memory are connected. Truth in Greece is alithia, from a, which means no, and lithi, which means forgetting. And also, EDUCEN tackles a highly relevant and important issue. It should generate results useful and usable, both at a national and at a local level. And finally, not finally, but one more thing is the synergy between the Museum of the City of Volos and the Earthquake Planning and Protection Organization. Our synergy with the museum also brought up that in educative programs, teenagers are a difficult group, so we decided together to ask our Polish friends to develop a serious game for teenagers. And the game is developed in English, then translated into Greek, and we will print it and give it for free to the museum and to schools. And the future is that we're going to keep active the network of experts and practitioners involved in our activities, and we're going to try to maintain the link between the Museum of the City and earthquake planning and protection organizations. Of course, the serious game is going to be finished and is going to become the concrete outcome of the project. And we're going to make available the Greek version of the manual. Finally, the language is a huge problem, and this was also something that we learned in this project. So, yeah, it has been a very fruitful adventure for us. And I think our case study attempted and succeeded at a certain degree to reveal that culture and cultural memory can be an asset in disaster management in all its phases. And this link between culture and disaster, though, is not straightforward. And it is really a great step that EDUCEN Handbook now is there and is a tool towards making culture useful and usable for disaster preparedness and response, recovery and reconstruction, prevention and mitigation. Thank you very much, and I would like to finish by offering you a song we discovered. It was made after the earthquakes of '54, and so sorry, does not work properly. Anyway, the lyrics are very interesting, I think. They say, the huge disaster Volos suffered made everything heavy, and it seems that there is no hope, but Volos is going to recover and become the brave city that it used to be. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, Pia here tries to get it started, and most things worked very well today, so why not this one? But I take the opportunity to thank very much Miranda Dandoulaki there is the song.
Okay, I think we don't need to listen to all of it because we don't have the time. But the thing is that once the disaster management society is aware of culture, then you can see culture everywhere, and you can identify elements of culture to use it in your work. So this song is exactly such an example. And we use the lyrics also in the serious game developed for teenagers.
Great, Miranda. And it also shows that we do not only try to translate our work into the local languages. You have Greek versions, and we have Turkish and Spanish versions of the city information, but also sign language and even music. So different languages of different ways of speaking to people's minds and hearts. So thank you very much for this introduction, and indeed to pointing us to audiovisual material that is partly also available on the website, which has the handbook, educen.cultureanddisaster.eu. And in my overview at the end of this webinar, I'll also show the participants where the information on Volos can be found in the city manuals. We now move to Poland. It's a kind of European presentation festival in that sense. We're going crisscross the map, and we end up in Poland, where Piotr Magnuszewski will tell us about the good sense of playing serious games. I once was involved in Latin America and wanted to get people to play games, and I said, come on, we're not children, be serious. But I think this mood is changing, and we now see even mayors playing with quite big enthusiasm, playing serious games to develop cultural empathy, as we call it, to not only understand it, but also to feel it, what it's like to, what happens when cultures clash, for example. So, Piotr, let me give you the floor to explain to us the good sense and experiences with serious games in disaster and culture.
Thank you, Jeroen. This is an excellent introduction. Actually, I usually start by telling people that probably think that games is something for entertainment, whereas we have now extremely serious applications of different type of what I actually call, as you said, serious games. And talking about examples like city authorities, I have just returned a few days ago from Abidjan at Ivory Coast, where I've been running our Water Food Energy Nexus game for the African Development Bank. They intended to use this game with other countries at the highest level. So this shows the scale of interest and potential for this type of tools that we explored very strongly in our project here. So I don't want to start from much of the theory. I would like to start by telling a story that happened in our project, in the Lorca case study. As you mentioned earlier, we had this besides Volos, Dordrecht, we have some other case studies. One of them was in Lorca, when They had a big challenge of having flash floods with the river, which was only occasionally a river. For most of the time, it was just empty space. People could forget about it, that it can be dangerous. And after 10 years, the very strong flood was coming. So they had great tools based on GIS and many other, but the challenge was how to communicate with communities and how to translate to them what they can do, what can be done with respect to preparedness and prevention. And this communication challenge is not unlike what Rik was mentioning earlier with the communities in Netherlands, that only older people are usually coming, whereas often young people are needed. So we had this, we created a game, or as also we called in this case, policy exercise, when we invited different stakeholders and participants were taking different roles. And most often they were actually taking the roles of who they were not in real life. So in this way, they have created, they were given an opportunity to have an empathy with some other people, which is really critical. So you can see the picture from this game and the proud farmers who participated, and you can see the simple tools that we used with some Lego blocks and how we recreated the situation of the river and what can be done. So we found it an excellent start and very interesting also with local TV, which we moved on. So as I mentioned, the empathy, the communication, the being in someone else's shoes is something which is driving many of the games and which gives them a lot of power. So some people call it in games empathy machine for this simple capacity. And I would argue also that the empathy is at the very core of the understanding and including the culture. So we had this challenge in our project to incorporate culture in disaster risk management. And we did it with in different areas, in different topics, subjects. So with different work packages that we had here in the project, we're focusing both on people, but also on social networks, on infrastructure, governance, cultural memory, and also what happens within organizations. Our challenge, our job was to develop games that we did not individually, but we were working both with the experts from specific teams from different work packages, and we were working very intensively within the project. So that you can see here the range of topics and subjects that our games were touching. We're also reviewing other games, not only the one that we developed, but other existing games in this topic, and both information that about the topics that you can see here and also about games. You can obviously go to EDUCEN Handbook and get more about it. So let me now review a few different games that we've been working on and developed, finalized in this game. This is the first one, Gifts of Culture. Jeroen also mentioned about this game. We had this situation that so we took the policy exercise, which requires a lot of role playing and actors moving around, and we created a board game that people can use in a more controlled way. And in this board game, we have different roles, the roles of people in the community, including many people who normally are left behind often, like people with disabilities, people who migrated economically for work, or refugees. And then one of the key points that we try to put in this game, that the culture is not only the source of the troubles, of problems, but also the source of inspiration. So actually these members of the communities are bringing a lot of insight, how best to make decisions. And it's again about how to lower the risk, how to avoid, how to best prepare to lower the disaster risk. So you can see how people can choose between different options, and we're actually also playing with people with different languages, involving stakeholders from both Italy and Spain and Sweden at the same time. The game, you can go to and download the whole game set. It's available. It can be played after the project is finished by anyone. So we create the whole, all the information are in the handbook with all the materials, sets and lists that you can run this game by yourself. The next game that we've been working recently and then has been already mentioned twice with the Volos and Dordrecht case studies was the cultural memory game, how to make this subject attractive and interesting, how to travel in time by using the game. And that, I think, what we, as you already heard from the case studies, we succeeded both in the case of Volos and Dordrecht. And these games also will be available after the project is finished. So it was collaborative work with our case study partners that you had the opportunity to hear already. So cultural memory game, this is, you can see some pictures. The game has been adapted to these 2 different cities, and it can be adapted also to some other cities that you in the future. And the toolkits will be available in different languages also through EDUCEN Handbook. One more game, evacuation challenge game, which happening on different phase of disaster risk management cycle. Where people have to face a very difficult situation with the threat and how to react to this, how to take people to the safe place, and have to be really creative. But people are not always responding to how you expect. There are a lot of cultural surprises that you have to be ready for. It's great material for understanding this better and discussing afterwards. This is quite short game, so it can be used in situations when time is of the essence. And of course, this game is again available also for anyone to use and apply. Finally, Flat Resilience game was a game that focuses a little bit similar with the map of the certain area, but it's focusing more on the infrastructure element that we had used in Valladolid in Spain very recently. And this game also is available through the handbook, so you can use it. It's a little bit more complex, but it's also something which is often needed as people need to discuss things deeper and in more detail than very simple games that are available. So not only the games that I told you about, but also many other existing games. We try to classify them using these specific topics that you've seen earlier: cultural memory, people, governance, organization, infrastructure, and networks, and how this. Some games actually apply to more than one topic, and you can go to the EDUCEN handbook, you can read this, you can choose and select the game which fits best your interests, but also your needs and challenge as either as a teacher or educator, facilitator, or consultant. So this is all available for anyone to use. One more thing to mention, that the games are also already been featured at the UNI SDR prevention website. So the dissemination is not only going through the EDUCEN website and handbook, but also other websites that are well recognized in the field, that there's different games have already featured there. And we've been putting guest editorials soon describing other EDUCEN games and applications that we have developed in this project. So you can see that how not only us praising this, but also other organizations and recognized websites are picking up the good work developed here on the different cultural topics in our project. So finally, I would like to very briefly summarize this short presentation with telling you a few hypotheses. Some of them has been already tested quite well scientifically and evaluated why games work well for the serious goals. So again, coming back to the subject from the beginning, it's not only good entertainment. They provide people with challenge, something which they can do, which they can engage immediately, not just sitting and waiting for other people to tell them what to do. People get into the game world, they forget about the real world. It's just a sort of magic circle that you fully engage in alternative reality and learn in this reality tremendously, or immersely, I should say. Games bring emotions, and information without emotion is not retained. So getting these emotions may be a little dangerous sometimes, may be difficult, but it's actually something which makes people remember and change also the attitudes, they what they think about certain issues, what they then later remember. And it's not just, as I said earlier, done by sitting and listening, but by doing, which is very attractive and also makes things stay with participants. It's very safe, so while we do things, we are not afraid of doing something stupid, but actually there's a point that when we experiment and do different things, we can see and experience the consequences, which help us to avoid the negative consequences in real life. And finally, by playing these games, people can get the overall perspective that sometimes our own, sometimes the future the problems that we have, if we get something on our head, will be an effect of our past actions that we have done earlier. So we have developed also a more thorough introduction to the perspective and applications, and also the philosophy which is behind the serious games, and how they can be used to foster empathy, experience, and learning. So again, I've been telling this many times, but there's so many good things in our handbook there that probably you can spare me for telling this again. So putting this all together, there's the 4 games that we have developed here in this and applied here jointly with our partners from the thematic work packages and also case studies that we are very happy to continue. It's not ending with this project, but it will continue, and we already have many, not only our partners, but also people outside interested in using and applying these games. There are also other games that I mentioned that are described in EDUCEN Handbook. So I would like to invite you to collaborate and play with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I very much feel like playing a game after this webinar. And actually, we did play at the start of this project in Wageningen, here where we are located now. We played a game called the Zombie Evacuation Game. And here is a short, let's say, rundown of what happened. And the amazing thing is that it took about half an hour to get everybody evacuated. But I would say, look at this video and enjoy.
There is a disaster going on at the moment, and you have to follow us to the evacuation assembly point, and we will assist you.
Sir, please, this side. Just sit down, I'll come to you later. No problem.
See that point over there? Can you walk there? No problem? Yeah.
The time is over.
I'm sorry you didn't manage to help everyone, but the time is over, so we need to stop now.
I asked all the people there to speak only in your native language. So that was some difficulty which rescue team had to face. So who is next one, please?
Be deaf, but I was treated like I was physically disabled. I mean, all forms of disabilities were treated the same. Like if we couldn't walk, and then, I mean, obviously you couldn't speak sign language, and I mean, the diversity of physical disabilities is an issue, and it was tricky for you, I guess, to take into account that a deaf person is not a blind person.
Yes, Nicole?
In my case, I was blind, and I only could speak in Spanish, so I thought, okay, I'm going to ask Gemma to let me out, but she was deaf.
That was a very short version of a quite long experience with evacuating people during the EDUCEN starting conference, which showed us that actually when you don't know what's going to happen and you bump into all kinds of cultural taboos and physical hindrances, then people may actually find it quite hard to immediately respond in a sensible and collaborative way. And also, not everybody knows what a zombie is. And that was, I think, the start of the problem. But then that is quite realistic. In case there is an issue here, and I am going to go around telling people, hey, we have a formaldehyde leak, then probably also people may think, what's that? Is that dangerous? Is it important? Is it urgent? So the importance of getting the message across cultures and across knowledge barriers is not easy. And Piotr's group develops games to help you experience that. So thank you very much for making us experience that and explaining that to us, Piotr. I think it's question time, in case anybody from our audience, our 18 participants, are interested to ask something to Piotr or one of the other speakers. Then this could be a good time. Things that you would like to know about the handbook before I go quickly through it to end this webinar session. Any questions at this point? Seems that people are content with what we've done so far. In which case we will now try a new experience which we have not done during the earlier webinars, that is to do the split screen and to go through the website. I'll try and take you through the website as it is with the handbook. You'll see the address in the box at the top, educen.cultureanddisaster.eu. That's the site where you find not only the handbook but also the city manuals, the toolkits, etc. So let's go through this. There are 6 chapters, what we call them, which are clickable 6 pictograms. After the introduction, you'll see a chapter called Culture and Risk. And I'll just show you that one because it was a kind of guiding theme for today. Cultural memory and cultural heritage. And each of our chapters has read mores. Now, in this case, it is simply for further reading, get some extra, what do you call it, extra reading bibliography. But we also have a section, which I will now go to, which has really a 2-stage learning part, because some stuff is quite complex and you don't want to go through everything at once. So, for example, we will vulnerability. Well, no, where's the other mapping? the people and the organizations in DRR. This is done by our colleagues and friends from Bari. You'll see a lot of read more, and it will clearly become why that is the case. They made analyses which people talk to whom in a disaster, which is really useful to know, because once you know who you can expect to talk to each other and to seek information from, then you can kind of predict next time who should be in the know to increase the situational awareness. Not just institutional responders, the fire brigade, the health workers, the Red Cross, but also, say, the volunteers or community leaders who can be expected to step up. So here I clicked on read more, and then you get a whole more technical explanation, including graph theory, which they then try to explain in a way that if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty of this mapping, then this shows you how to do it. Still try it in a quite concise form, but if you want to get into it, then this is where you start. So that was just a few of the topics that I mentioned that you'll find in this this handbook. We have a section on cities, which could be useful for understanding how cities are places of complexity, that city managers don't always keep disaster in mind, while cities have heritage and have aspects that should be kept in mind, that can be helpful when a disaster happens. And so city managers and disaster managers should actually dialogue more about how to make the most of this situation of urban risk. We also put quite some effort into replicability of our work between cities and cultural learning. The only way that in a particular way is that it's a repeated learning experience and reflection on the experience of people of disaster. Something that happens only once is less likely to make an impact than something that happens repeatedly, or something that is so big that it's, for example, for my parents' generation, only two things really matter about the 20th century. One is the Second World War, and the second one is the big flood, the storm flood in the Netherlands of 1953, which is a kind of cultural trait. And now the Dutch defined themselves, as they already did before, but even more since then, in the fight against water. That can be a plus, but it can also be a minus, in the sense that you're not so likely to learn new things once you think that you've got your dikes and your flood management covered. So that's just an example, and you heard from Miranda how it is in Volos, how an earthquake culture can be in cultural artifacts, but the memory may need to be jogged, maybe help people to relive the memory or to learn about the past by grandparents taking their children to a museum and to learn about and to talk about the 50s. So apart from all these topics that I mentioned and went through in the handbook itself, there are also resources to support this. One is a set of 4 tools, which is a guiding questions, a toolkit, a video library, and a wiki, which was mentioned by Miranda in her presentation. The wiki is based on state-of-the-art that we made in this project that gives you very short definitions of various key topics. Gender, for example. So that is a kind of quick Wikipedia version of the handbook. And the 7 case studies, the city manuals, and in this context I should really mention eCatalyst, who have taken the lead on this and also support. In this case they really made the whole process going, and you'll see the 7 cities: Dordrecht, Istanbul, L'Aquila, Lorca, Milan, Umbria, and Volos. You've heard about Dordrecht and Volos in more detail today. But each of those has a manual of, say, 20 to 50 pages of our experiences that are particularly useful for people working in these cities or with these cities. Not only professionals in the disaster sector, but also city managers, community leaders, people working with NGOs, or interested citizens can learn about our experiences in EDUCEN and more generally about their city, what's possible, what's happened, and what could be done in future. So that gives you an overview of what is in the handbook, and you navigate through the handbook. What I would also like to point out is something that was mentioned before, that we don't only look at culture in the sense of different groups in society and their social networks, but also organizational culture. So in that sense, the EDUCEN is also a microcosm of that. I could simplify things by saying, for example, that Miranda is a trained engineer, that Rik is a land and water manager, that Piotr is a systems analyst, but that would actually not do justice to the kind of things that they do in their daily work and in EDUCEN, as they have engaged with other disciplines and other fields of knowledge, and that is what makes EDUCEN and networks like them work. And actually, we've also, as EDUCEN, tried to reach out to similar or related projects like Capflow, like Placard, to also learn from them and to exchange with them, so that we end up with a kind of culture and disaster family, which hopefully will also keep meeting and having family reunions after the end of the project. If you have any questions at this point, then again, please use the dialog box. If not, then I think it's time to bring the session to a close. We're also getting closer to 4:30, so that was our cutoff point anyway. And I would like to thank our speakers for today, Rik Heinen, Miranda Dandoulaki, Piotr Magnuszewski, and also at the beginning, Georg Frerks. I would like to thank Pia Werner for technical support. And I would like to thank the whole EDUCEN consortium for the hard work that they put in, and dedication and enthusiasm into making this project happen. And if there's enough enthusiasm and will and energy, then we'll also continue doing dissemination activities like trainings and maybe another webinar. But in that case, we really need some feedback from you as listeners and wider network of what kind of things you would like from us, and we will come up with some creative ideas of our own as well. So thank you very much for your attendance. I should not forget the audience who stuck with us for the past almost an hour and a half. And I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me. Maybe you did not see what we saw. In case it was not the case, we apologize. We tried to show you bits of the handbook. If you did not see it, or if it was not clear, then please go to the handbook, which will guide you automatically to anyway the moment that I stop talking and that we close this this session. What I was busy saying, thank you very much, participants in the in this webinar, which we will post on YouTube in the handbook itself, and hopefully also on the Emerald site, and hopefully keeping in touch with you at some other points. And please let us also know if you would like a printed version of the handbook, which should be available in about 2 weeks from now, and which we will make available from the EDUCEN headquarters. Thank you, and see you next time.